John McMullen covers the Eagles, Bird 365, weekday mornings at 8 a.m. on the Jacob Media YouTube channel. You can watch that tomorrow morning, get reactions, and, of course, right now on the Sports Bash is Paris Campbell apparently is the latest casualty. Him and John Ross, a couple of veterans, not making the Eagles' initial 53, John, so some interesting moves today. Let's start with that. No Campbell and John Ross. Can we see those guys back, or are there names that have been released today that might interest the Eagles?
Quez Watkins. No.
Oh, jeez. He did get released. He did get released today by Pittsburgh.
I don't want to get Eagles fans excited. Now, I'm a little bit surprised that Paris didn't make it simply because Anaya Smith is going to start on injured reserve. And I thought maybe that would open up a spot. And you know, you think about Jahan Dotson getting here, and he's got to get ramped up in a new offense very quickly. Maybe the Eagles would have liked to have had that veteran presence. So I thought there was a little bit of a chance that that move would have meant they'd keep him around at least for a few weeks until Jahan Dotson got up to speed. But, yeah, I mean, that wide receiver group was not wowing other than obviously at the top with A.J. and Devontae. So evidently the Eagles want to move forward. It wouldn't be surprising if they brought one of the two back to the practice squad. You know, you're allowed to have veterans on the practice squad these days, so they can go about it that way. And I would, you know, depending on what you want, if you just want that speed trait, you probably want John Ross, although Paris is fast himself, but not really the deep threat, or at least he hasn't been in his NFL career, more of a slot receiver. If you want that, you'd go that direction. But, you know, the Anais news sort of opened up a little bit of hope for those guys, but not overwhelmingly surprised that both are out.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Watkins. He did get cut today, and I don't know, was there any – I don't know how much you've been scouring the waiver wire, but is there a name – that stands out that might make you say, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought him in?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they're looking to bring in, certainly. Their move was Jahan Dotson. I mean, that was their move at wide receiver, and I think, you know, it'll take a little while. You might have to be a little bit patient, but that was the splash move at wide receiver. I think if you're looking outside the organization, it's going to have to be tight ends, where looks like they're only going to keep two on the initial 53. And obviously, Kellen Moore is known for liking to play 12 personnel. So you can't play 12 a lot if you only have two tight ends. You need a backup. So they're going to bring in somebody. And it, you know, might be Jack Stoll, who got released by the Giants. So obviously there's familiarity there. But, yeah, I think they've made their splash move at wide receiver. They're fine with what they have. It was just a matter of, do you want a placeholder that can maybe play some snaps while Jahan Dotson gets up to speed?
Right. You know, one game was Terrence Marshall got released by Carolina, former second-round pick. The Eagles seemingly like to kind of grab guys who have, you know, had talent, high ceiling elsewhere. We'll see wide receivers that get released between now and the next 56 minutes. John, you mentioned the tight end spot. Jack Stoll and but that would be a spot you think they're going to still go. Albert O looks like injured and be out at least half the season.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised that, you know, that might be a situation where they couldn't work out the injury settlement because it's a little bit more difficult. Because I was originally told they were just going to move on from Albert, but, you know, they have to put him on injured reserve. I don't think that's about waiting for him to be healthy. I think it's just that he got hurt. He had to have surgery, and that's what you have to do, and maybe they can work out an injury settlement down the road. And then E.J. Jenkins, I think, was the one that a lot of people thought that maybe could make the team as the third tight end. But he's very young, very raw. I think you can get him back to the practice squad anyway, so you can build it that way. And they really need a blocker, which is why Stoll probably makes a lot of sense, because it's not that Dallas can't block. He's a very good blocker, but, he's also, you're kind of wasting him if he's got to be the guy that's playing in line all the time as a receiver. So obviously Grant Calcaterra, E.J. Jenkins, Albert Ogbegbenon, all of them are not blockers, so maybe they want more of that Stoll-like presence just to take a few snaps per game.
Yeah, we had Colin Thompson on earlier. Maybe he should get by the phone, right? Need a blocking tight end.
There we go. Yeah, blocking tight end.
John McMullen's with us. Eagles cut-down day is beginning, and obviously yesterday they made a couple of moves right after we got done talking, and one of the guys was Sharpering. He's out, one of the offensive linemen there. So I would imagine we kind of hit on this yesterday, but don't expect a lot of surprises today. But just because the 53 finishes today doesn't mean you're safe.
No, and that's why we call it, the savvy of us at least call it the initial 53. It's certainly not the final 53. That'll be in place later in the week, and even that, obviously, there's constant churn at the back of the roster as you go through the NFL season, whether it's you want to improve or it's just attrition. There's going to be constant sort of churn at the back of the roster. So, it's just initial, and obviously tight end would be the perfect example. I mean, they're only keeping two. They're not going to play with two tight ends on the 53-man roster. So, right there's going to be at least one move before the week is over, once that initial 53 is put in place.
Yeah, you got yesterday Will Grier, not a surprise. Perry Nickerson and Julian Okwara, both those guys are, Nickerson has played in the league. Okwara, 9 sacks with Detroit, has been a guy who had some talent, third-round pick. Not that we're surprised that they got released, but that kind of tells you a little bit about the depth on this roster.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, Howie made a big deal about the future signings this year. Okwara among them, guys like that. Terrell Lewis, who's also going to get waived. Eric Kennard, who probably is also going to get released. So, but they're all practice squad candidates, and they might be back from that perspective. I don't know. After that Minnesota game, I got some questions about the depth, but it's interesting. I have more questions about the depth on the offensive side than the defensive side. So I think obviously the starters on the offensive side are off the charts, but I think there's some depth issues. And defensively, I think you got some problems with the starting 11, and I think the depth is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So it's kind of turned upside down.
Well, we were talking about this. It might have been right after you got off yesterday, which was the Eagles liked their linebackers. We might have had this discussion, but they liked their linebackers. But what if they found a guy they liked more? They wouldn't have a guy that they really want to give up on, though.
Yeah, I know everybody, and Ernest Jones got traded to Tennessee, so that pipe dream is over. But, they were never going to look for an upgrade from that perspective, because they don't value the position, so they're not giving up assets. Howie's going to talk in a little bit. I'm driving down to talk to him. He can say what he wants, but actions speak louder than words when it comes to that perspective, and they just haven't valued the linebacker position. So they're not going to go out and bring in a meaningful piece. And then from the perspective of, I like the depth. I don't know if they have starters, but I like the depth. So it's not like they can't improve.
Yeah.
They can certainly improve. But typically when you're talking about the waiver wire and guys who get cut elsewhere, you're talking about improving depth. And I don't think they need to improve the depth. The time to get a starter was when they got Devin White and Zach Vaughn, and they made their decisions.
Yeah. And
we'll see how it holds up.
John McMullen, Birds 365, weekday mornings, 8 a.m. on the Jacob Media YouTube channel. Eagles cut-down day. As Roseman and Sirianni speaking at 4:15 today. I saw, Caleb Farley, former first-round pick, but at a corner spot. I mean, normally, again, this is kind of areas where Howie generally like, hey, you got a first-round pick who's on the street, we'll take a shot. But it seems that they like that room so much that they don't need to go down that road.
No, not even remotely. They're very, very deep at corner, and they're going to be moving on from corners that are probably NFL players and should be in the league. So they've remade that room, and that's not to say there's not going to be hiccups with the young players, and Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean and Isaiah Rodgers after a year off, but they're very happy with that room, and no, they're not looking to add anybody there.
Nope, I would agree with you there. Obviously, John, they got a lot of time between 4 o'clock today and the start of that season, which is on that Friday night, which is a little less time than some of these other teams have. But at this stage, is the depth chart pretty much set for you as well? Do you think that they're pretty settled in, that the battles have been won, or is there still stuff that they're going to figure out between now and that Friday night?
No, I think they're set. They haven't really given the hint of who it's going to be a linebacker, whether it's going to be a rotation, but I think they know, and they're trying to keep that close to the vest. And yeah, everywhere else they're set from that standpoint.
Right.
At this stage, right or wrong, yeah, and that really nobody is debating who their starters are going to be. They might not be comfortable with their starters, and I'm not saying that about the Eagles, but they know across the league who they have to go with.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the things that'll be interesting to see is, starters, but also rotational playing time. That first Friday night, how much Nolan Smith are you getting? How much Jordan Davis are you getting? How much Milton Williams? Those are all things that will kind of materialize before your eyes, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And, somebody like Nolan Smith, he's going to be part of the rotation, and if he does well with what he's given, he might get a little bit more. And if he does poorly, he might get a little bit less, and you might see those changes. But I think the plan is in place of where you want to start, and obviously you tweak it from there. And I'm hitting the Walt Whitman Bridge, so there's always a dead spot in case you lose me for a second, but I'll be back.
I know Nick's talking, and so is Howie Roseman today, and I'm assuming the big stuff will be, about the guys who actually do get cut. But is there anything else that needs to kind of come out that you guys want to kind of find out about this team between now and then when you get one more chance to talk to Howie?
Hopefully we'll get more, but, probably not in public.
Right.
But obviously, first you want to talk about Dotson and the trade from that perspective, which is interesting because if you think about the role he's projected to have, I think some people look at it, well, he was the 16th pick in the draft, and he got him for a third-round pick, and he got a fifth-round pick back, and that's a lot for, it's like a car. The depreciation starts right away. So when you're a first-round pick and an unsuccessful one, especially for a role that's, not to be a starter, to be that third receiver complementary part of it, that's not, that's a lot to give up a third-round pick. And it's indicative that Howie believes that this is a Super Bowl team. So hearing him talk about that trade will be interesting. And then obviously how he builds this roster and the perspective of the new rules. I mean, this year the Eagles are taking advantage of the injured reserve rules with Sanaya Smith. I'm not sure what that means. I haven't seen the designation if they're going to designate Albert Guegmanon to return. That'll be interesting. I would be a little surprised if they do. But Howie has liked him since he traded for him last year, and he hasn't really shown or evidenced as why. But let's be honest, Mike. Sometimes ego gets in the way of these things.
By the way, the Eagles are releasing Brett Toth is coming out now as well. Is that a surprise?
No, if Nick Yates comes out, I think Nick Yates is going to make the team. And so far, he's still alive. And
Hanging in there.
that might surprise. Yeah, that might surprise some people because he came in late, and they brought in Matt Hennessy, who got hurt, and they brought in Max Sharping, who started a lot of games, and then they brought in Yates, and he seems to be the guy who's kind of played well, taking the bull by the horns, and I think just if you look at the health of Mekhi Becton and the knee, and it seems to be nagging at times. And then you talk about Tyler Steen and his injury. You better have a plan B. Forget about plan A, plan B, maybe even a plan C in that interior of the offensive line. And Gates is a guy who started 30-something NFL games. He can play center. He can play both guard positions. And I always go back to that Super Bowl season when the Eagles had the young guy, Isaac Seumalo at the time, who was a second-year player, much like Tyler Steen is this year. They wanted him to win the job. They gave him the job at the start of the season. He didn't play well, and they replaced him with Chance Warmack, who didn't play well. And then they went to Stefan Wisniewski, who played well enough to start the Super Bowl, win a Super Bowl. So I think that's sort of the replication, maybe, that Howie's going for, that if Becton doesn't work, if Steen doesn't work, maybe Nick Yates will work.
Right, because Brett Toth would have been the backup center, right? That's kind of where he was working.
Yeah, and that's another, is Dylan McMahon going to make it as a sixth-round pick? Yates can play center, so you have some other options there. Todd's big thing is he's versatile. He can play every position on the offensive line. He's a natural left tackle. He's not a natural center. And he's taken a long time to learn the position, actually. So, and he had a bunch of snapping issues last year. So he's another guy that might be back on the practice squad, but they have other options at center, and Nick Yates can play the position.
All right, John. Well, drive safe over the bridge. We didn't lose you in that dead spot. Roseman Sirianni in 1 hour with the updates. The rosters need to be in 42 minutes, and we'll have all the updates for you right here on the Sports Bash. John McMullen, weekday mornings, 8 a.m. on the Jacob Media YouTube channel with Birds 365. All right, John, we'll talk to you, buddy.
All right, Mike. And by the way, doing some business on the air, you're going to be there tomorrow morning, so we can talk about it. We can talk further about it.
We will have a firm finish of the roster. I will talk to you then.
All right. Thanks, bud.
All right. John McMullen, everybody, here on the Sports Bash. As always,